Welcome back, everybody, to another deep dive with us. Today, today we are exploring a story that has really captivated people for centuries, the healing at the Pool of Bethesda.
Yeah,
And whether you're familiar with the story already or encountering it for the first time, I think you'll find something really thought-provoking in our exploration today.
I think so too.
Yeah, we're going to kind of uncover a story of healing challenge to authority and the profound relationship between a father and a son.
It's a story that is just rich with layers. It really intertwines the physical and the spiritual. What might seem like a straightforward miracle at first glance, it actually opens up all these questions about faith and obedience and the very nature of healing itself.
Exactly. So to kind of set the scene for our listeners, we're in Jerusalem, and it's a bustling city just teeming with people who's come to celebrate this Jewish festival.
Hmm.
And among all the crowds in the ancient architecture, there's this place, the Pool of Bethesda, known for its 5 covered colonnades.
Oh, yeah.
Imagine these long walkways supported by rows of columns,
Yeah.
and this pool had a reputation for miraculous healings.
And the text specifically mentions that this pool is near the sheep gate. And that detail isn't just some random geographical information, because the sheep gate was where animals were inspected and washed before being sacrificed at the temple. So right from the start, we're introduced to this idea of cleansing and purification.
Yeah, almost like a ritual cleansing.
Right, which becomes like a key theme throughout the story.
Oh, that's a really good catch. I didn't even think about that. So even the location itself is adding this kind of symbolic layer to the story. And among those gathered at the pool hoping for a miracle is this man who's been an invalid for 38 years.
It's heartbreaking.
That's almost an entire lifetime.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the weight of this suffering? The years of just hoping for a breakthrough.
Yeah, the text tells us that people believed an angel would stir the water at certain times, and the first person to enter the pool after the water was stirred would be healed. But for this man for 38 years, that moment of healing remained elusive. He was trapped not just physically, but perhaps emotionally and spiritually as well.
Yeah, he's not just battling a physical ailment. He's battling despair. He's surrounded by others who are experiencing healing, and he's stuck watching, waiting, wondering if his turn will ever come.
Right.
And then into this scene of suffering and anticipation steps Jesus.
It's a moment of such stark contrast, right? We have this bustling crowd, the desperation of the sick, and then this figure of authority and compassion appears.
And what does Jesus do? He doesn't perform some elaborate ritual or demand a grand display of faith.
No.
He simply asks the man a very direct question. Do you want to get well?
And I think for the man, after years of yearning for healing, it must have been like a jolt to be asked that. It forced him to confront his own desire, his own hope.
Right, were there even any hope left?
Yeah, maybe even his own doubt.
What's interesting to me is that the man doesn't even directly answer Jesus' question.
No, he doesn't. And I think that's where we really see the depth of his despair. He's so focused on the obstacles, on why he can't get to the water in time, that he doesn't even allow himself to embrace the possibility of a cure.
He's almost resigned to his fate, isn't he?
Yeah.
It's like he's saying, well, of course I want to be healed, but what's the point? It's never going to happen.
Right.
But Jesus doesn't indulge his resignation. He doesn't offer sympathy or empty promises. Instead, he issues a command, get up, pick up your mat and walk.
And there's such power in that command, a power that transcends just the physical act of healing. It's like Jesus is saying, I see your suffering, I hear your doubt, and I'm calling you to step out of it. I'm calling you to rise above your limitations, to embrace a new possibility.
It's a beautiful moment of transformation.
Yeah.
And what's incredible is the immediacy of it all. The man doesn't have to wait for the water to be stirred. He doesn't have to go through an elaborate ritual. The healing is instantaneous. It's complete. He's able to do what he hasn't been able to do for 38 years. Pick up his mat and walk.
It's incredible.
But of course, this miracle, this act of defiance against the limitations of the physical world comes at a price.
Right, because this healing, as miraculous as it is, it unfolds on the Sabbath, a day of rest in the Jewish tradition. And performing work, even the seemingly simple act of carrying a mat, was strictly forbidden, according to their law.
So essentially they're saying, even on the Sabbath,
Right.
you still have to follow all these rules.
You can't do any work.
No work whatsoever.
So Jesus' actions set off a chain reaction. It's a clash between his authority and the established religious order.
It's like, wait a second here. Are you really questioning me?
Right.
It's really interesting to me that the Jewish leaders, instead of marveling at this healing, they fixate on this perceived violation of the Sabbath law. They confront the healed man, not with congratulations or curiosity, but with accusations.
Wow, yeah.
They're more concerned with upholding the letter of the law than celebrating the miracle that's right there in front of them.
And that's a tension we see play out time and again throughout history, the struggle between rigid adherence to rules and the spirit of compassion, the tendency to prioritize tradition over transformative change.
Yeah, it's like, oh, we have this rule here, so there's no way that what you're saying is correct.
Right.
The man, though, offers a very simple yet profound defense. He says, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" He's essentially saying, I was following a higher authority, an authority that defied the limitations of my body and the restrictions of your law. It's like, you're telling me that your rules are higher than this.
Yeah.
It's this powerful moment of defiance, and it highlights this central conflict of the story. Who holds the true authority? Whose commands should be obeyed? And what happens when those commands clash?
Right.
It's like we're witnessing this collision between two worldviews, the worldview that clings to the safety of rules and tradition, and the worldview that embraces the possibility of radical change and healing, even if it means challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
And this clash isn't just confined to this ancient story. It's a tension that we grapple with in our own lives,
Oh, absolutely.
isn't it? It's this pull between following the established path and forging a new one, the challenge of balancing tradition with the need for evolution and growth.
It's a story that continues to resonate with us even centuries later. It invites us to consider our own relationship with authority, with tradition, and with the potential for healing and transformation in our own lives.
Yeah, and that's just the beginning. This encounter at the pool is just the first act in a drama that will unfold, a drama with profound implications for our understanding of faith and obedience and the relationship between humanity and the divine.
It's true.
But before we dive deeper into all those layers, let's just take a moment to reflect on what we've uncovered so far. What stands out to you in this initial encounter, in this clash between the miraculous and the mundane?
Well, what stands out to me is the man's response. He could have easily just said, Jesus healed me, and left it at that. But instead, he emphasizes the command, pick up your mat and walk. It's like he's clinging to that command as proof of his healing.
Almost like as a shield against the accusation.
Yeah, as a shield against the accusations of the Jewish leaders. It makes me think about the ways we hold on to evidence of our own transformations. The ways we seek validation for the changes we've experienced, even when those changes challenge the expectations of those around us.
Yeah, it's like, see, look, I was told to do this, and this is proof that this happened.
Right, exactly.
It's amazing.
It's really cool. Yeah, it's like he found his voice, his agency through this act of obedience to Jesus. And it's that very obedience, that challenge to the established order, that sets the stage for the theological fireworks that are about to erupt.
Okay, so you're telling me things are about to get even more interesting. I'm all ears. Where do we go from here?
Well, we're left with this standoff between the healed man and the Jewish authorities. They're demanding answers, wanting to know who this mysterious healer is who dared to break the Sabbath. But Jesus, as you might expect, has already slipped away.
Ah, so he leaves them with a mystery to unravel, a miracle to ponder. But he doesn't abandon the healed man entirely, does he? I remember from my own reading that Jesus later finds him at the temple, right?
You're exactly right. And this encounter, it's not just a friendly checkup. Jesus gives the man a warning that might seem a bit harsh considering all that he's been through. He says, see, you are well again, stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you.
That warning always struck me as a bit puzzling. On the one hand, you have this miraculous healing, this incredible act of grace. And then on the other hand, you have this warning that seems to imply that the man's illness was somehow connected to his sin. I can imagine for some listeners, especially those unfamiliar with the concept of sin in this context, it might feel a bit judgmental. What are your thoughts on this?
It's definitely a statement that requires some unpacking. First, it's important to understand that in Jewish thought at the time, there was the strong belief that illness could be a consequence of sin. Now, we don't have to agree with that belief, but it helps us understand the context of Jesus's words.
So he's speaking into a worldview where there's this direct link between spiritual and physical well-being. Okay, that makes sense. But still, why the warning? It's not like the man asked to be sick.
That's where it gets really interesting. I think this warning points to something deeper than just a cause and effect relationship between sin and illness. It suggests that the healing Jesus offers isn't just about the physical body, it's about the whole person, about a restoration of wholeness.
You're saying it's not just about walking again, it's about walking a different path, a path that leads to a deeper kind of healing.
Exactly. And I think that's a message that's incredibly relevant for us today, even if we don't use the language of sin. We all have patterns, behaviors, ways of thinking that keep us stuck, that prevent us from experiencing true wholeness. Maybe it's holding on to anger or resentment. Maybe it's allowing fear to dictate our choices. Maybe it's chasing after things that ultimately leave us empty. These patterns, these choices can be just as debilitating as any physical ailment.
It's like he's saying, I've healed your body, but now it's up to you to heal your heart, your mind, your spirit. It's a call to take responsibility for our own well-being, to make choices that lead to a deeper, more lasting kind of healing.
Precisely. And this call to wholeness, this challenge to examine our own inner lives, is intricately tied to Jesus' claim up controversy. Now Jesus is going to add fuel to that fire with some pretty audacious statements. He tells the Jewish leaders, "My Father is always at his work, and I too am working."
Wow, that's a bold claim.
Yeah.
He's not just saying I'm a healer. He's saying I'm aligned with God. I'm working in partnership with the divine. It's like he's claiming a level of authority that's equal to God's. No wonder the Jewish leaders were outraged.
Their reaction is understandable, especially within their religious framework. For them, claiming to be equal with God was blasphemy, the ultimate transgression. And what's fascinating is that Jesus doesn't back down. He doubles down, explaining that the Son can do nothing by himself. He can only do what he sees his Father doing.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? He's claiming a divine connection, this unity with God, and yet he's also emphasizing his obedience to the Father's will. It's like he's saying, I am one with God, and yet I am also surrendered to a higher purpose.
It's a concept that's difficult to grasp fully, even for those of us who are familiar with Christian theology. But I think the key here is this idea of alignment, of being in harmony with the divine will. And he goes on to say, the Father loves the Son and shows him all he does. There's this incredible intimacy in that statement, this sense of closeness and trust that's both beautiful and awe-inspiring.
Yeah, it really is. It paints a picture of a relationship that's beyond our human understanding, a relationship of perfect love and perfect obedience. And this relationship, this unity with the Father, is what gives Jesus the authority to heal, to challenge the status quo, to offer a new way of being in the world. But for the Jewish leaders, these claims are just too much. They see him as a dangerous heretic, a threat to their authority and their understanding of God.
And that's where the conflict really intensifies. Their desire to silence him, to eliminate this challenge to their power starts to grow.
So we have this incredible act of healing this man who's been freed from his physical limitations, and yet the focus shifts to a debate about authority, about who has the right to interpret God's will, about who gets to define the boundaries of faith. It's a reminder that even in the face of undeniable miracles, human beings can get caught up in power struggles and theological debates.
And it's not just ancient history, is it? We see these same dynamics playing out today in different forms, of course. The struggle between those who cling to rigid interpretations of beliefs and those who embrace a more expansive, evolving understanding of faith. The tension between those who hold power and those who challenge that power.
It's a human drama that keeps repeating itself even as the context changes. And it makes me wonder, what would it take for us to move beyond these power struggles, to truly embrace the spirit of healing and transformation that Jesus embodied? What would it take for us to recognize the miracles happening all around us, even the ones that challenge our comfortable assumptions?
Those are questions worth pondering. And I think this story, with all its complexities and contradictions, offers some clues. But before we dive into those deeper layers, I'm curious, what's resonating with you so far? What's sparking your own questions or insights?
Honestly, what's hitting me the most is the contrast between the man's experience and the reactions of the Jewish leaders. Here's this guy who's been miraculously healed, who's experiencing this level of joy and freedom he probably never thought possible. And yet the authorities are completely fixated on this technicality of the Sabbath law. It's a reminder that sometimes we can be so blinded by our own agendas, by our need to be right, that we miss the beauty and the wonder unfolding right in front of us.
I think you've hit on something really profound there. It's so easy to get caught up in the details and the rules and the need to maintain control that we lose sight of the bigger picture, the essence of what really matters. And in this story, what matters is the healing, the transformation, the possibility of a new way of being.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if they were even capable of seeing the miracle. Or if their minds were already made up, their hearts closed off to anything that challenged their worldview.
It's the tragedy, isn't it? To be so focused on defending your position that you miss out on the opportunity for growth, for a deeper understanding of truth. And it's a trap we can all fall into, especially when our beliefs are challenged, when our sense of security is threatened.
It's a sobering thought. So how does this story ultimately resolve? We've got this escalating conflict between Jesus and the religious establishment. This man who's been healed, but now he's caught in the crossfire. And these profound questions about authority and beliefs are just hanging in the air. What happens next?
Well, Stories It doesn't end with this neat resolution. In fact, it sets the stage for an even greater conflict, one that will eventually lead to Jesus' crucifixion. But before we get to that, it's important to note how Jesus responds to the growing opposition. He doesn't resort to force or manipulation. Instead, he appeals to reason, to evidence, to the very scriptures that the Jewish leaders claim to uphold.
So he's like a lawyer building a case,
Ex-
laying out the evidence, pointing to the witnesses, trying to persuade them to see things from a different perspective.
Exactly. He talks about the testimonies about Jesus, not just his own words, but the testimony of John the Baptist, who had prepared the way for his ministry, and the evidence of his own works, the healings, the miracles, the transformation that people had witnessed with their own eyes.
So it's like, don't just take my word for it. Look at the evidence. Talk to the people whose lives have been touched, whose bodies have been healed, whose hearts have been changed.
Right.
Like, this is real.
Yeah. And he even challenges them to consider their own scriptures, reminding them that Moses, whom they revere, wrote about him. It's a powerful argument that appeals to their own beliefs and traditions.
It's like, if you truly believe in your scriptures, you should believe in me. I am the fulfillment of what you've been waiting for.
Right.
But it seems like their minds were already made up.
Yeah, their resistance to Jesus, it really highlights this recurring theme in human history. The difficulty of accepting new ideas, especially when those ideas challenge established power structures and traditional beliefs. It's a reminder that sometimes seeing requires more than just physical sight. It requires a willingness to open our minds and hearts to new possibilities, to let go of our preconceived notions, and to embrace a larger truth.
That's a challenge that resonates with us today, too.
Oh, absolutely.
We all have our own blind spots, our ingrained biases, our resistance to ideas that disrupt our comfortable worldviews.
This story invites us to consider our own relationship with truth, with evidence, with the possibility of being wrong. It challenges us to ask ourselves, what would it take for us to change our minds? What kind of evidence would we need to see to shift our perspective, to embrace a new way of understanding the world and our place in it?
It's a question that's worth asking ourselves, not just in relation to this story, but in every area of our lives. What assumptions are we clinging to? What beliefs are holding us back? And what would it take for us to let go and embrace a more expansive, more compassionate, more truth-filled way of being?
That's the invitation of this story, an invitation to step out of our comfort zones, to question our assumptions, to be open to the possibility of transformation, even if it means challenging the status quo, even if it means risking the disapproval of those in power.
It's a powerful message, and one that's as relevant today as it was centuries ago. This story of healing, of challenging authority, of confronting deeply held beliefs, reminds us that the journey towards truth is rarely easy. It's rarely straightforward. It requires courage, open-mindedness, and a willingness to let go of what we think we know in order to embrace a larger, more expansive reality.
Even though this particular story doesn't have a neat and tidy ending, it leaves us with a powerful image. The image of a man who was once trapped by his physical limitations, now walking freely carrying the evidence of his healing. A testament to the transformative power of faith and the courage to challenge the status quo.
It's a beautiful image, and one that offers hope, even in the midst of conflict and uncertainty. It reminds us that even when the world around us seems fixed and unyielding, change is always possible. Healing is always possible. Transformation is always possible.
That's the ultimate takeaway from this deep dive, an invitation to embrace the possibility of healing in ourselves, in our communities, and in the world around us, an invitation to step into the unknown, to challenge the boundaries of what we think is possible, and to trust that even in the face of adversity, that the spirit of transformation is always at work.
It's been an incredible journey exploring this story with you today. I hope our listeners found it as thought-provoking and insightful as we have. And if you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more explorations of history, culture, and the human experience. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.